I just got back from a ski trip with my family, and I made a decision right before we left that I was really proud of. I deliberately left my laptop at home, but I took the iPad, for movies, for family time. By day 2, I was using the iPad to write this episode. And the most embarrassing part is once I realized what I was doing and put the iPad down, once I chose the board games over the Notes app, I spent the next 20 or so minutes pushing away thoughts of the episode while trying to keep track of whose turn it was. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Scott, and this is Keep the Flow, a show about the creative life. And today I want to talk about something that I think a lot of us are quietly dealing with, but maybe haven't had the words for. Why is it so hard for creative people to actually take a break? Not just physically step away from work, but mentally be somewhere else. Because I think we feel guilt about this. I do, at least, trying to be present with friends or family while your creative gears are still turning, especially if you get called out for it. When somebody notices, you feel awful, embarrassed. Like you look like you don't care about the people you're with. And I don't think it's just that we love what we do. I think there's something deeper going on. And the research actually backs that up. So instead of feeling guilty, let's look at why we're like this. Obviously, there's something different about us. Creative people internalize what they do more than people who work in less creative fields. I mean, there's a case to be made that all lines of work have the potential for creativity, but you know what I mean. If your work is based on your creative ability, you feel more attached to it, like in a way that it is you, or at least part of you. Researchers who study creative identity have found that for people who work in creative fields, the creative practice itself is often a core component of their self-concept. Meaning it's not what you do, it's who you are. And that changes everything about what it feels like to step away. There's actually a psychological term for this, identity fusion, the degree to which your personal identity and your work identity are fused together. And for creatives, that fusion tends to run deep, which means that when you stop creating, even briefly, it doesn't feel like a day off. It can feel like a loss of self. I think I've kind of always known this about myself, but sitting there trying to play a board game with my family while my brain is working on a podcast episode or a melody or working out an idea on the drums, that's not enthusiasm. That's something else. It's a kind of identity anxiety. It's, you know what it reminds me of? FOMO, the fear of missing out, except you're scared you're missing out on ideas. So I've been like this for as long as I can remember. When I was into skateboarding, if I wasn't skating, I was thinking about it, sketching tricks in class when I should have been learning algebra. When I started playing the drums, if I wasn't behind the kit, I was driving someone crazy tapping my pencils on the desk. Whatever I'm doing becomes a kind of obsession to the point where my mind is so busy thinking through possibilities that sometimes I find it hard to be fully present with people. Which is why I left the laptop at home on the ski trip. I was hoping to have a fully present, good old-fashioned Griswold family ski trip with no creative impulses, no distracting ideas, just good food, board games, and movies on the iPad. Which, in reality, is my preferred writing device, but honestly, I wasn't thinking about that when I decided to take it. Here's where it gets really interesting and a little validating. Your brain has what's called a default mode network. Basically the system that activates when you're not focused on a specific task, when you're daydreaming, spacing out, letting your mind wander. And here's the thing, that default mode network is also the primary engine of creative thought. So when you're doing nothing, your creative brain is often at its most active. And here's where it gets specifically relevant to people like us. A study found that highly creative people show more exploratory thinking during unstructured rest. Our minds are more engaged, more wandering, more generative, even when we're doing nothing on purpose. In other words, your creative brain doesn't have an off switch in the same way that other people's brains might. So that pull is always going to be there. We don't have a choice. This also connects to something called the incubation effect, which creativity researchers have known about for decades. When you step away from a creative problem, when you take a break, your unconscious mind keeps working on it. It keeps processing, making connections, reorganizing what it knows. The shower idea isn't an accident. It's the result of quiet background work that was happening while you thought you were just getting clean. So here's the paradox that I sat with on that ski trip. Rest is part of the creative process, according to neuroscience. Taking breaks is literally good for your work. And yet, knowing that didn't make it any easier to close the Notes app and pick up the cards. Being on vacation is actually really good for creativity, but bad when you're actively fighting against it. So what's the solution? The first thing is we have to accept who we are. You're not a bad person for feeling a pull toward pursuing some random idea when you're on vacation. And the people in your life need to understand that too, which means you actually have to tell them. Don't assume they'll figure it out. Talk to them. The second is having somewhere to put the idea so it stops screaming at you. A voice memo, a notes app, a paper notebook, it doesn't matter. You just need to get it out of your head and into something you trust. Once it's captured, the urgency stops. You can go back to the board game or whatever. And then there's the activity itself. On the mountain, I wasn't thinking about the podcast or music I'm working on. I was thinking about my edges, the next turn, not falling. Skiing demanded everything I had. The board games were harder. When it's your turn, you have to do something, but in between, it's easy for the mind to drift. You're just sitting there with the people you love, which turns out to be its own kind of practice. That practice, being present, tolerating the creative urge without immediately feeding it, is worth getting better at. Not because rest matters more than work, but because those people playing the game with you are part of why the work matters in the first place. So if you've ever been the person sneaking away to work during a family vacation, I want to hear your version of the story. You can leave it in the comments, DM me on Blue Sky, or email me at scott@ktfpod.com. I may share a few in a future episode, anonymously if you like. Thanks so much for hanging out. I'll catch you in the next episode. Until then, keep the flow.